Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this brand new episode on this brand new show. This is the breakfast show, the healthy breakfast show, and I am Dr. Vine Ibauchi. With me here is
Dr. Esther Ibauchi. Today we're going to be talking about stress and its management. First of all, we're going to start with stress. What exactly is stress, Dr. Vine? Can you tell us what stress is? What are the symptoms of stress? How do you know you're stressed?
okay. Stress, as we know it, revolves around not being comfortable about the situation you're in. That's the general perception of stress. Now, stress is a very broad term that cuts across a lot of aspects of life. We have mental stress, we have physical stress. So a couple of people see it as the moment you're only physically stressed, maybe you run from one place to another place and you're panting, or you keep on doing a lot of hard labor for a couple of time, for a period of time, it comes off as if that is the only stress somebody might actually have. But in reality, we have physical stress, we have mental stress, and we also have what we call surgical stress. But that one has to do with the surgeons and the medical personnel. But our focus here should be on physical stress and mental stress, the one that impacts on the general population. Now, if you look at stress, if we want to consider stress as an isolated topic, mental stress would be considered a situation where you're not peaceful in your mind. Somebody might be having a lot of troubles, a lot of turbulence in their mind, and they're not at rest. They're not at rest because of one reason or another reason. That is a clear indication of mental stress. And like I said initially, physical stress is one that when the person is actually feeling physically exhausted because of one particular activity or an accumulation of different activities, well, that's the general definition of stress like we know it. So the symptoms, the manifestations of these types of stress, we see them as being tired, even when you feel like you shouldn't be tired at this stage, at this point in time, but you're feeling yourself tired, you're feeling exhausted, you feel like you don't have energy. And here, let me bring in something. There are two energies. There is a mental energy and there's a physical energy. For somebody who is stressed mentally, the person might have physical energy to carry out work, but there won't be any mental energy. In that sense, there will also be no motivation to go about with the work. But in the case of somebody who is having physical stress, the person might actually mentally be ready to go ahead and get the work done, but because of lack of physical strength, the person is not able to go ahead and get that particular work done. So in a nutshell, these are the more common features of stress, and I feel if we look more into this and find out why we are being stressed, it goes a long way in helping us manage the stressful conditions. Like I mentioned about the symptoms of stress, tiredness is one symptom of stress. Irritability. You're so irritable about the environment. You don't feel comfortable about the environment. You don't feel comfortable about something. That's a sign of stress. At the same time, too, this leads to, it's more like a chain of events where suddenly you start having anxiety about something. You're anxious about something. And while you're being anxious about something, your response to other things that you're supposed to do becomes insignificant. Your contribution to something else you're supposed to do becomes very much insignificant because you're so occupied with something else that you cannot give your effort and your attention to something else. So this is like a chain of events. Tiredness, the body is tired, the mind is tired, and that can lead to unease. It can lead to irritability. You want to get something done, you cannot do it, and being irritable, before you know it, your next thing, you feel anxious about this thing you're not able to do, or something that has been troubling your mind. You start having anxiety. And like we know, a lot of times anxiety actually breeds increased and elevated blood pressure. And that is where the medical impact of stress comes in. So before we round up in this episode, we need to consider what are potential remedies to stress and how would stress be advised. How would you advise stress to be managed, Dr. Esther?
Okay, in this aspect, we're just going to talk about potential remedies to stress. How do you stay away from stress? First, I think you identify your trigger and know your limits. Like, these are the 2 key points. Anytime you're stressed, you want to know what triggers the stress and identify it at all costs. Then know your limit as well. What do I mean by know your limits? Don't go ahead doing things, okay, I'm exhausted already, I'm tired, I'm close to having a burnout syndrome and all, but you still go ahead pushing and doing, like, even when you're exhausted. So you identify your triggers, know your limits. Then in the face of a stressful situation, what do? It's advisable to just take a deep breath at that point and pause on whatever you're doing. You can take a deep breath, you can walk around. For us that go to work, like when you're at work, you're already exhausted with work, you're tired. Of course, you don't need to have you're having a headache already and you're still there focused on your laptop, you're working tirelessly and all. You can just pause at that point, take a deep breath, walk around. Like, if exercises help, you take, walk around, do 1 or 2 exercises. Of course, it's not something that you should maybe run around or something, just walk around. And the idea is to pause and halt on whatever you're doing. Then, if at that point you're having an anxiety disorder, or you're just seeing yourself because sometimes stress comes with palpitations, you can just see your heart racing and all. So if at that point you see yourself having anxiety disorders or your heart is pulsing, nothing stops you from just leaving the environment where you are. You can just step out from that environment, maybe go home or go to a place where you can relax, because stress is very, very dangerous to health. Just like Dr. Vine rightly said, you don't want to be put in a situation where you're being diagnosed with hypertension and you have to start taking medications every now and then and be on meds and all. So you try as much as you can to avoid anything that leads to stress. Like I said, identify your trigger. If what triggers you, it could be a difficult person around you, and then time you're around the person, you're just stressed up and you're angry, and you try and avoid being close to that person. Like we said, mental stress is very, very dangerous. You can even manage physical stress, like you're tired, you just rest and you better. But mental stress is something that it goes a long way to, and it's very deleterious to health. So that's what I think is a remedy. 2 key points: identify your trigger and try to stay away from it, and know your limits. Don't go beyond your limits. Of course, the world is stressful, work is stressful. In fact, everything is like 80% of everything around us is stress. It's considered stress. So don't go above your limit. Know when you're tired, know when you're exhausted, and just try to relax and take a breath from that situation. So, Dr. Vine, any final words you want to leave us with on stress?
Before we come into the final words, before we go into that, there is something else she mentioned I would like to chip in. We live in an environment and we live in a world where almost everything around us is a stress trigger. You could actually consider you wake up in the morning, you take your bath, you have your breakfast, and you step out of your door. That moment you step out of your door, you could actually have your neighbor, say one or two angry stuff at you, and before you know it, your mental health is already in tatters before you even step out for the day. And you continue, probably because of what your neighbor said, you just have a bad mood and then you just keep on going ahead for the rest of the day with that. So the next stop, maybe from your house down to the metro station where you take a train or a taxi to wherever you want to head to work, you feel agitated, you feel uneasy, you feel so much unrest in your soul because of what your neighbor just said, or because of the confrontation you had with your neighbor. And that continues for the rest of the day. And while you're in the train or when you're in the cab, you're busy thinking about all of this, and you're just wondering, did I give an appropriate reply? Am I supposed to come back home and let her deal with this? And then you take that spirit, you take that emotion into work. And work is waiting for you, and work is piling up for you. So you combine mental stress with physical stress, all because these are the triggers, are just things that are within your environment. So it is very important that we understand that even if you don't look for stress, stress is going to look for you. The easier it is to recognize this, the more easier it becomes for you to manage stress. When you consider that there is likely going to be an event that somebody says something that is going to hurt you, the idea that you don't let it hurt you, or the idea that you don't take it beyond a couple of minutes or seconds, means you give your head, you give your spirit, you give your soul time to absorb positive energy rather than all the negative energy that should have come up from that confrontation. When you go into work and then you see the physical stress that is waiting for you, considering that you have a clear head, you're not mentally stressed at that point in time. You have a clear head. You're able to figure out that this is the best way for you to go ahead and get the task of the day done. A simple division of labor. I'm going to do this between 9 a.m. and 10 a.m. I'm going to rest between 10 a.m. and 10:30 a.m. Then from 10:30 a.m. to 12 noon, these are the things I'm going to do. Just by having a clear head, you're able to make proper breakdown of how you're going to handle the events of the day without getting everything accumulated and being physically stressed. So while you can actually get mental stress can actually lead to physical stress. And if you don't take care of one, it's going to affect the other. Coming to the final words on stress, there's also something we call post-traumatic stress disorder, which is a real mental health issue. Most times people who have gone through certain events in life, they don't get over such events because it just keeps occurring and reoccurring to them, and they cannot get over it. People who have had terrible incidents, maybe an accident or the death of a loved one or something that is so unusual or something that is very much triggering. In that case, these are things that it would be very difficult for you to handle them alone. My best advice would be to seek the help of a professional, to seek the help of a mental health expert or a doctor near you, for them to help you navigate this issue. It is not something to be trifled with. At this point in time, we shall be coming to the end of this